Hi everyone. This video is for lesson 1.03 of semester 2 of U.S. History called City Life. The rapid growth of cities called for new ideas and a new approach to urban issues. Architects like Daniel Burnham and Louis Sullivan created exciting new buildings that took advantage of vertical space. Skyscrapers began to dominate the landscape in Chicago, New York, and other large cities. Landscape architects like Frederick Law Olmsted, designer of New York's Central Park, planned opportunities for quiet relaxation within the urban environment. Urban dwellers who had more leisure time than ever before sought other amusements as well, and vaudeville, baseball, amusement parks, and more emerged to fill the need. Which would have been your choices? Goals for this lesson. Describe the work of urban planners, including Louis Sullivan and Frederick Law Olmsted. Describe amusements that were popular in the growing cities of the late 1800s, and demonstrate a mastery of important knowledge and skills learned in previous lessons. And that means a quiz. There'll be a quiz at the end from lesson 1.02 and lesson 1.03. Before we go on, let's go to lesson resources. Grab your reading guide and or lesson answer key. And let's begin. We're going to read pages 551 to 557 in the textbook. Complete the reading guide. Complete the Just a Walk in the Park online activity. Read the chapter 24 highlights and take the quiz. All right, let's begin. Oh, we got to go begin by the reading. Okay. So page 551, we're going to start with planning cities. That's where we left off last time. In response to the disorder and stratification of America's growing cities, a number of municipal leaders embraced the concept of planned cities. Urban America had grown up without much planning. Buildings were crowded together, vulnerable to catastrophic fires. Unpaved city streets bred disease and filth. Seeking to impose order on the chaos of America's growing cities, planners wanted to make urban space better organized and more livable. Planners liked the idea of organizing cities into distinct sections, one section for factories and warehouses, and another one for office buildings and shopping districts, another for apartment houses and private homes. A properly planned city, they thought, would provide its residents with separate areas for work, home life, and entertainment. Central Park. New York City's wealthier residents wanted their city to be a great metropolis like Paris and London. They admired the urban parks in New York cities and sought to import that idea to New York. They envisioned a place in which they could enjoy carriage rides with their families and retreat from the clamor of city life. Central Park, here's a picture, an artist rendition of the early days of Central Park. Central Park, designed by landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted in the late 1850s and early 1860s, gave New Yorkers all they hoped for and more. Olmsted believed that the park would be more than a place of leisure. He saw it as fulfilling a moral purpose. He saw this natural refuge within the city as not only a place where people could relax and renew themselves, but also as an antidote to problems of pollution, disease, crime, and drunkenness. Central Park was one of the great public works projects of 19th century New York. Some 20,000 laborers, many of them immigrants, turned Olmsted's plan into reality. They dug, hauled, chopped, blasted, and planted to create a landscape of rolling meadows, lakes, and separate pathways for pedestrians, horses, and carriages. The park opened for use even while construction was going on. Soon millions of people were visiting the park each year. They enjoyed summer concerts or winter skating. The wealthy took rides in their carriages. At first, strict rules forbade group picnics or ball playing, but in later decades, the rules were dropped and the park became more welcoming to all social classes. And of course, today is a top tourist destination if you ever go to New York City. Daniel Burnham, urban planner. An innovative architect, Daniel Burnham became one of the nation's first urban planners. After designing some of the most notable buildings in Chicago, he oversaw the design and construction of Chicago's World Columbian Exposition in 1893. The so-called White City that formed the backbone of Chicago's World Fair was in effect a model planned city with clean streets and well-organized, efficient modes of commerce and transportation. While the White City was an exposition, not a real residential area, it represented Burnham's vision of a more orderly urban life. In 1909, Burnham and his colleagues developed the Plan of Chicago, a comprehensive blueprint for the orderly growth of the city. Burnham developed similar plans for other cities, including Washington, D.C., Cleveland, and San Francisco. And here's this picture. Let's look at this. the caption. Urban architects built upward. In New York City's 54-story Woolworth building, seen here under construction, was the world's tallest building when it opened in 1913. Because of course that's what led to skyscrapers, making the most of your limited space, trying to build up instead of building across. Going up, modern urban architecture. As the city spread out horizontally, they also grew vertically. What I was just saying. Daring American architects, most notably Chicago's William LeBaron Jenney and Louis Sullivan, took advantage of technical advances to erect skyscrapers, bold new structures that dramatically altered the physical appearance of American cities. In 1884, Jenney designed Chicago's home insurance building, over here, to the left, often considered the first modern skyscraper. Mass production of steel made this essential material readily available for constructing a tall building and held up by an internal steel skeleton. Skyscrapers offered businesses an efficient way to use space and house employees. Later breakthroughs, such as hydraulic powered electronic elevators, first used in the Eiffel Tower in Paris, made it practical for people to work in even taller skyscrapers. No architect was more associated with modern urban design than Louis Sullivan. Sullivan argued that form follows function. You may have heard that phrase before. It's not an uncommon phrase. Form follows function. By this, he meant that a building's design should be based on its intended function. A building, he said, should use space wisely and be tailored to the practical needs of its occupants. In the late 1880s, Sullivan designed a 4,300-seat theater in Chicago, the Auditorium Building, which also included 136 offices and a luxury hotel. At the time, it was the tallest building in the city. The emphasis on vertical development remains to this day a key feature of urban architecture in many American cities. New forms of leisure and entertainment. New public amusements changed the city dwellers' leisure time and the quality of their lives. Inexpensive entertainment provided working-class urban residents with an escape from work and encouraged a sense of community. Many theaters cost only a nickel or a dime to enter. And if you ever heard of Nickelodeon, like the TV, Nickelodeon, the cable channel, Nickelodeons were first known to be movies that only cost a nickel, or a show that was a nickel, a Nickelodeon. So anyway, that's your bit of trivia there. People went to theaters not only for the show, but also to gossip, to boo and cheer the performers, and to sing along with the chorus. The theaters offered a variety of fare, from Shakespeare to vaudeville shows. Variety shows with singers, dancers, comedy acts, and magicians. Not only in cities, but across the country, traveling circuses drew large crowds. Phineas T. Barnum, a flamboyant showman, opened a huge circus in Brooklyn that he called the greatest show on earth. It featured not only exotic animals, clowns, and daredevil horseback riders, but also sideshows specializing in the freakish and the bizarre. In 1892, Barnum loaded his circus into 65 railroad cars, which took the show to many cities and towns. In the late 1880s, Barnum was joined by a junior partner, James E. Bailey. The Barnum and Bailey Circus, featuring Jumbo, claimed by Barnum to be the world's largest elephant, drew thousands to his three-ring extravaganza. By about 1900, Barnum and Bailey met with strong competition from the Ringling Brothers, who ran an efficient large-scale organization with an emphasis on family-friendly acts. Around the turn of the century, another inexpensive form of entertainment, amusement parks, came along. But let's look at this poster. Here's a Barnum and Bailey circus poster. I love those old advertisements. All right, so anyway, back to there. Around the turn of the century, another inexpensive form of entertainment, amusement parks, became increasingly popular. At parks like Steeplechase and Luna Park in New York's Coney Island, people rode mechanical rides such as the Ferris wheel, visited fun houses, and walked through replicas of Eskimo or German villages that offered visitors imaginary trips to faraway lands. On Coney Island, besides going to amusement parks, working-class people visited theaters, bars, and restaurants, and gathered for beachside picnics in summertime. On another part of the island, wealthy visitors from Boston and New York patronized luxurious hotels and fancy restaurants. More than 20 million people went to Coney Island in 1909. When motion pictures came along in the 1890s, people paid 5 cents to watch short silent films in theaters called Nickelodeons. As the screen flickered with images, a pianist or organist would play music to accompany the scenes. In the early 20th century, with the development of full-length feature films and later of movies with sound, urban audiences packed into lavish new movie palaces such as Chicago's Oriental Theater and New York's Rialto. The movies and other forms of entertainment offer millions of city residents an affordable way to escape from work, see neighbors, and enjoy the material wonders of the modern city. Here's a picture of Steeplechase Park in Coney Island. And the one here at the bottom is a baseball game, which we're going to read about next. Baseball and the rise of spectator sports. In the late 19th century saw the rise of a new form of leisure for Americans, spectator sports. Football, basketball, and baseball teams organized in leagues instead of being observed by a few friends or casual observers. Sporting contests were attended by thousands of paying fans, and rivalries formed between teams and regions. The development of baseball can stand as an example of the growth of spectator sports in America. Baseball emerged early in the 19th century as a game played by farm boys in the country meadows, by townsmen on the village green, or by students on college campuses. As the game grew in popularity, baseball was on its way to becoming a national pastime, but from one region to another there were many local variations in rules, types of balls, and distances between bases. Following the Civil War, the rules of most influential amateur baseball organization, New York Knickerbocker Baseball Club, were adopted throughout the East. Teams can now travel from city to city and play one another without confusion. In 1862, an enclosed stadium was constructed in Brooklyn, and fans proved willing to pay to see their favorite teams and players. The first all-professional team, the Cincinnati Red Stockings, was organized in 1869. In 1876, team owners organized to create the National League, featuring teams from Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati, and New York, all among other cities. The game of baseball soon became the business of baseball. By 1900, a group of Midwestern clubs, including teams from Cleveland, Chicago, and Minneapolis, formed a new American League and started a baseball war against the monopoly of the National League. Higher salaries wooed players away from the older league to the upstart American League until peace was restored in 1903. Owners then established franchise rules and restricted the movement of players between the American and National Leagues, including less well-known athletes from the minors to the major leagues. In that same year, competition between the leagues found a constructive end, and enduring the outlet in the first World Series, in which Boston defeated Pittsburgh 5-3 in a best-of-9 series, with attendance just over 100,000 for the 8 games. Beyond attending sporting events, many Americans also participated in sports or sought various forms of exercise. In the nation's early years, when the country is mostly rural, the day-to-day work of clearing, plowing, and tending the land proved more than enough physical activity. But in the late 19th century, as more and more urban middle-class people worked at desks and offices, they began to use their leisure time to pursue physical fitness. Brisk walks in the park or a visit to a local gymnasium became very popular. Shopping and consumer culture. In the last few decades of the 1800s, middle-class Americans were lured downtown by a new feature in many American cities, department stores. So guess what? You're going to learn about the history of shopping here, everybody. We're learning about the history of entertainment, history of sports, and shopping. What could be more fun than this? These stores were a far cry from the small-town general store with its cluttered rows of practical goods. The new department stores, such as Marshall Field's in Chicago, Filene's in Boston, and Bloomingdale's and Macy's in New York, were massive, dazzling palaces of consumer commodities. Store designers used glass displays and electric lighting to entice shoppers to spend. Some Americans began to buy items on credit. Instead of paying with cash, they in essence took out short-term loans to pay for their purchases. As cities added electric street lamps, department stores and other businesses stayed open into the night. On newly paved downtown streets, urban Americans enjoyed window shopping as they strolled by colorful, brightly lit displays behind huge panes of glass. In 1899, an instructor in the economics department of the University of Chicago, Thurston Veblen, published a biting analysis of the growing consumer culture in America. In The Theory of the Leisure Class, Veblen argued that a new leisure class had emerged, and that the members of this class maintained their status by engaging in conspicuous consumption. As Veblen put it, the basis on which good repute in any highly organized industrial community ultimately rests is its punctionary strength, and the means of showing punctionary strength, and of so gaining or retaining a good name, are the leisure and a conspicuous consumption of goods. Now not the consumption of essential useful goods. On the contrary, said Veblen, in order to be reputable, consumption must be wasteful. No merit would accrue from the consumption of the bare necessities of life. Rather, the consumer's good fame was based on expenditure